Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Interesting Modelling Company Midweek Show. Bit of a different one tonight because, well, Spencer's having it's his wedding anniversary tonight. So congratulations to Spencer and Liz, the boss. So we've let him have the night off, frankly. And Drew's working. Drew's on late tonight. So it's me on me lonesome. Johnny No Mates here. So I thought we'll have a slight change to the format. And we've come up with what we have called JMQs. And so lob your questions at me and I'll do my best to answer them. And we'll also be trying to delve through some bits and pieces here tonight to chat about. So that's pretty much the format. We're just going to run for an hour tonight and you lob a question at me and I'll see what I can answer. And then we got the first question tonight, actually, and it is from Jim Altegard. And he says, have you worked out your plans for remodeling the model room? Jim, I have. Sadly, my plans to remodel the model room have been slightly kiboshed by my MOT this year, the car, not me, and also coming up at the end of August, tax bill. So yeah, we're going to have to wait a little bit longer for that now. So disappointing, but you know, I've got a place to work. I just, you know, I had ambitions, but real life had other ambitions. So yeah, we will do it at some stage. And Peter Oxley says, when will the right honourable gentleman come on air? Honourable, that's a farce. Me, that is. And Paul Cave, here we go. Right, okay. Let me just go and grab some artwork here because I have neglected in the rush to get on the air tonight. I have neglected to share. Hang about. We have Waze Fest. Right, this weekend is We Have Waze Fest 2022, and I'm just going to call up the branding on the screen here. Oh, I'll do this by myself, folks. There we go. It's We Have Waze Fest this year, and this is going to be held at the Black Pit Brewery at Silverstone. And long story short, this is in conjunction with the We Have Ways of Making You Talk podcast, which is presented by James Holland and Al Murray. So there'll be lots of kind of events and things on the day. There'll be talks, there'll be live demonstrations in the field, there'll be vehicles, there'll be lots of vehicles. So it's absolutely going to be packed with this. There's going to be special guests as well. Would you believe they've even got the granddaughter of Heinrich Himmler is going to be there, and she's going to be talking about you know, about living with a family name, but also, you know, trying to educate Germans, or, you know, kind of like educate Germans and other people on the history and the legacy of Nazism in Germany. So that's going to be fascinating. I'll probably mangled what she's going to do, but here we go. Speakers. So here we go. We'll talk about what I'm doing, but I'm very interesting. There we go. Katrine Himmler. And it says, is a German author and political scientist. Her great uncle, sorry, not granddaughter, her great uncle was Heinrich Himmler, head of Hitler's SS. She was confronted her family legacy with the book, The Himmler Brothers, A German Family History. She's edited, together with the historian Michael Wilt, Letters of a Mass Murderer. So, yeah, this, whether I can make it to make it this talk, but this looks like it's going to be a really fascinating you know, really fascinating talk. You know, and we've got Max Hastings as well. For those of you who remember Max Hastings? He was the journalist who was in the Falkland Islands, and I think he's the one who rather famously came up with the line, I'm not able to tell you how many aircraft flew out on this mission, but I can tell you I counted them all in. I counted them all out, and I counted them all in again. So Max Hastings is going to be there, Sir Max Hastings, rather. James Holland is going to be there, OVS, as is Al Murray, OVS. And there's going to be some other speakers as well. We've got Peter Caddick Adams, and Peter is a writer and broadcaster, specialises in military history. And he's going to be giving a talk on the final bitter and bloody battles in the West fought across the 300-mile front through to cities, towns, villages, and forests. And we've also got, whoops-a-daisy. Who else have we got? I'll just run through this anyway. We've also got Peter Caddick Adams, Maurice Bilk, John McManus, Katia Hoyer. I do believe she was there last year. Alex Ritchie, Phillips, Payson O'Brien, Jack Mann, Saul David, Waitman Bjorn, Gajendra Singh, Ingram Murray, Paul Beaver. I think we all know Paul Beaver from his writing works. Rob Lyman, Andy Aitchison, Andy Chatterton, Joe Coles, no, not the footballer, Christopher Bergs, Jonathan Fennell, Stephen Fisher, Will Iredale, Bernard Cast, Ian McGregor, Mark Milner, Rana Mitter, Rex Factor, Sean Scullion, John Tregoning, Jans Venner, Bastian Willems, Daniel Todman, John Lilly, Giles Milton, David Willey, Kate Viggers, the London Django Collective, Ned Holland, Fighting on Film, and the Home Guardsman. So that's kind of like, that's a rundown of the festival speakers that are going to be there. What am I doing? Well, I'm going to be in one of the tents doing a modelling demo for the hobby company. What am I going to be working on? I will be actually building the 35th scale Italeri Crusader tank, because I think that's going to be an interesting and popular one to talk about. It's older kit, obviously, but I think it's still got some currency these days. I think I'm also going to be building one of the Tamiya 48 scale Tigers. I'm going to bring along one of my Bren carrier kits, my Tamiya Bren carrier kits, because they've always got lots of Bren carriers at that show. So I think that would be a good one to do. And I will be talking to Mr. Andrew Farmer over the next couple of days just to finalize what we're going to be doing, you know, any other kits we can think of. But that's the core of it. It's going to be the Crusader, it's going to be a Bren carrier, it's going to be a Tiger, and whatever else we can squeeze in over the 2 days. And what I'm just working on a loose schedule at the moment, so that we can kind of announce in advance what people can expect, you know, in the morning and afternoon sessions on the Saturday and Sunday. So that's it at the moment. All right, Ian Goldstraw, he says it was Brian Hanrahan of the BBC who counted out the Sea Harriers. I do beg your pardon. Every time I think of Brian Hanrahan, all I keep hearing is Peter Hanrahan from the Day Today. So yeah, Brian Hanrahan. Good job I'm not doing any historical talks. God, I'd be talking about how, you know, the Britain dropped the atomic bomb on the Belgians or something. You know, I'd be all over the place. And Griffia says, any particular announced kits that you really have to get once they're out? I can't think of any. There aren't going to be any kit announcements at the show. But any particular announced kits that you really have to get once they're out? At the moment, I'm looking forward to getting my hands on a Hellcat. I'm a bit behind the times with the M10 Hellcat, but fingers crossed. And what else is out there? Goodness me. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the Wolfpack F5E that was announced today. So they're doing a twin seat F5E/F. I know the Dream model kit came out a couple of years ago, but if you've seen the Wolfpack stuff, it is really, really nice stuff. And I'm trying to think what else am I looking forward to? Lots of things. Brain gone dead for a moment there. Sorry about that. There we go. Rob Sutton says, Peter, you've lost the news. That's a reference to Peter Hanrahan. And what else have we got here? David Ross says, World War II fighters in 1/32. Yes, bombers in 1/32 scale. No, too big. Don't have room, to be honest. Now, I agree with that. There's... I do think, I know down the years, people have said, you know, oh, can we have 32nd scale bombers? I know people go, can we have a 24 scale Lancaster and stuff like that? But where are you going to put it? You know, sorry, my cat is doing something in the office now. Where are people going to put those things, as well as how they're going to afford them? And I do wonder at the moment with, you know, with the way prices are creeping up, is whether or not whether we're going to see a bit of a lull in you know, big kits for the time beings, and whether we're going to kind of settle down to more kind of mid-range kits in, you know, kind of like 48 scale, you know, and 72nd scale. I don't know. I'm not talking them down, but I do wonder how, you know, inflation and increased prices are going to start affecting these, you know, these uber kits like the Border Lancaster, and, you know, some of the other kits out there where we're talking about a couple of £100 for these kinds of things. Anthony Bird says, there we go, Austin K2 ambulance, as indeed am I, Anthony. And as soon as that kit is available, I'm hoping to have one and you know, have it on the show and talk about it. I've got test shots, but I can't talk about them because I'm not allowed to. But all I can say is it does look good. And Donny Torres says, Gecko K2 ambulances. Indeed, Gecko are doing one as well. So come on, folks, I'm going to make you work tonight. So ask me a question and we will endeavour to answer. Here we go. One from Jim Tate says, have you seen the Border 32nd scale Lancaster? Any views on it, especially the issues around the clear parts, considering it cost £600 or thereabouts? I've seen inside the box. I can't remember there being any issues with the clear parts that I saw. Got to say, it's a very impressive kit. I mean, it's a lot of plastic, but obviously if the kits are going out there and there are you know, problems with the clear parts, you know, it's not a cheap kit to suddenly be hitting kind of problems, really. So hopefully Border can get that sorted out. But yeah, it's a beautiful kit. Would I build one? Probably not. It's just, I like to have projects that I can get in and get out relatively quickly. Ha ha ha. You know, so something like that is an investment and a commitment. It's going to be investment in terms of finance. It's going to be a commitment because you're going to be building that for the best part of 2-3 months plus. So you'll get your money. I to be honest with you, I when it comes to projects, I do tire of things sometimes where if I've spent too long on them, I just think, oh, this is turning into a bit of a slog now. And I'm not experiencing that with the Mini Art Tempo, although I have reached a stage now where I'm trying to get some of the photo etched little kind of like brackets and flanges and things onto the flatbed. And yeah, that's testing my patience, quite frankly, because they're small pieces you have to fold into like a U shape. There aren't any score lines on there, so that you can't, there's no natural score lines for you to fold them. So you're folding on, it's a metal on metal fold, if you see what I mean. I've got me folding tools here, and I'm using every trick in the book I can think of, including annealing the photo etched brass in a gas flame beforehand to, you know, to soften it up and everything. But even then, you're trying to fold something where they haven't actually put like a little score fold into it. So you fold these little things up, then the bits on the end have to actually kind of slot over a little bit of plastic that sticks out from under the flatbed. Yeah, I say my enthusiasm for that kit has been slightly sapped by having to deal with photo etched bits, and I'm not a big fan of photo etched bits at the best of times, but this is just, anyway, we'll deal with it one way or the other. Sadly, I won't be bringing that to the show at the weekend because it's It's not a company distributed by the hobby company, so never mind. David Murray says, very interesting sprue talk, Jem. I recommend that any of your regular viewers pop along for a watch. Yeah, I would as well, especially if you're suffering from insomnia, because you get to see me droning on for another hour or so. No, it was good. It was very thanks to Dale and Luke for inviting me on the show and to talk about the work that we do. We, to be honest with you, we barely scratched what's involved, the history, my involvement, and the work I did with Dick Ward initially. There's a whole load of stories that remain to be told. So perhaps we'll talk about them in a future edition. But it's very kind of them to invite me on, and I enjoyed it greatly. And hopefully people will get something out of that, because as I said on the show, I think a lot of people, or there is a perception that kit decals are not as well researched as aftermarket decals, and I will dispute that, because I research and draw aftermarket decals, so I'm bringing in the same levels of research and hopefully attention to detail that I would with an aftermarket sheet. But I think people think that kit sheets are just done by staffers in-house who are just pressing buttons, and it's honestly not like that. If I would be slightly boastful for a second, I try and make sure that the work I do for Airfix and other kit companies is the base level is it's as good as an aftermarket sheet. The aspiration is always to make it better than an aftermarket sheet. So when you get these kind of slightly loose assumptions that they're not as well researched as aftermarket sheets, I can think of several instances in the last few years where I've done a scheme and it's come out on an aftermarket sheet, and the first thing I've done is I've looked at it and I've just kind of literally like a red pen. It's like, nope, that's right, that's not right, that's not right. You've handed that, you've mirrored that when it should be handed. All manner of things. Of course, I get things wrong, and it's annoying when I get things wrong, but I try and minimize the errors. And also, there's also this perception, which we kind of slightly touched upon on the show, on the sprue talk thing, and I've seen it again this week, is people saying, oh, well, the decal schemes in the kits are not very adventurous, not very imaginative, or they're they're repeating what has already been done with aftermarket. Problem you got there is some subjects you're always limited in what you can do in terms of what what you can actually do as a in color schemes and markings and things. The other thing, which I don't think people sometimes appreciate, is that when you're doing a decal sheet for a kit, you're having to tie that into the kit, into what the kit gives you. So sometimes your choice of schemes then starts to get narrowed down. Aftermarket sheets tend to have a bit more leeway. They can give you schemes that might not necessarily match the kit, but they can offer them as schemes. You can't do that when you're doing stuff to tie in with a plastic kit. So and also this again, I will point to the fact that if I was to go through all the stuff I've done in the last, whisper it, 25 years, they're shaking their head in the gallery there, they can't believe it. 25 years, I can point to any number of occasions where we've done stuff that's never been touched before. Nobody has ever done that scheme or those markings or anything like that. So I think sometimes there's a lot of kind of like really kind of weird assumptions that you just have to kind of like gently steer people around, because their assumptions sometimes aren't necessarily correct. So yeah, long story short, thanks to Luke and Dale for letting me be on the show. And like I say, hopefully we can pop on again at some stage. Brian says, here we go. Brian says, I followed those Wii U brackets over the edge of a 6-inch rule. Funny you say that, because I've got a 6-inch rule here, but I've got a 12-inch ruler here. Yeah, I started doing that. I was trying to do them on the photo etch tool, but yeah, they I think as I said earlier on, Mini Art didn't put like fold lines into the photo etch, so they don't naturally want to fold over. It's a pain. It's it's not the end of the world, but it is a nuisance. Yoav Efrity says, "Did you demonstrate Humbrol second generation acrylics?" I did, and the video should still be up there on YouTube and on Facebook. I'm just trying to see what we've done with the model. We've actually got round here somewhere. There is the demo model. Bear with me a second, folks. Goodness me, I put things down in this workshop and they go walkabout, and I can't find what I've done with them. Un momento, per favore. There it is. That's what we're looking for. We did, and we did some. We did a mixture of hand brushing and spraying. That was the 90 beige green or sky, but that was airbrushed on, and that was actually airbrushed on with only a minimal amount of thinner. Those there have been brushed on. That's about 2 coats there. We also have been messing around to see if we can do spray patterns as well. My current opinion is, and like I say, we're still testing these things. They do brush paint very well. Some of them brush paint and they need a little bit of thinning. Some of them brush paint straight out of the bottle. Obviously, colors, you're going to get that variation where some colors will brush fine, just like some colors will airbrush fine. Some colors need a little bit, you need a slight adjustment of technique, I think is a good way of putting it. But in terms of brush painting, they do seem to have a slightly longer drying time, which I appreciated because it means you can then get the brush marks out. And bear in mind, I was testing these over the last couple of weeks or so when it was like really kind of like subtropical. So at the moment, the initial tests are encouraging, and like I say, they do actually brush paint really nicely. And I think my advice to the guys at Humbrol who I'm dealing with on this is that I think most of the people who are going to be using these paints will be brush painting them. I know some people do like to airbrush, me as well, but to be honest with you, if I'm doing airbrushing, you know, I tend to choose the paints that are better for airbrushing. Just as much as if I'm doing hand painting, you know, I won't be trying to hand paint Tamir acrylics or Gunzi acrylics or Mr. Color lacquers. So it's horses for courses. But yeah, they do brush out quite nicely. Perhaps we'll do another demo at some stage. I'm still, like I say, I'm still going through an evaluation process, but they're encouraging. Let's put it this way. So and as and when I can get the chance to really build a project where I can use them properly, then I certainly will do. Blah, blah, blah. Let's have a look down here. Steve Moore says, do you ever get credited in the kit for designing a decal sheet? No, I'm not looking for publicity. No, it sounds a bit strange that. Not really. No, I do like to I'd like to sit in the background a bit, because then I can listen in on the online conversations that go on about these things. You know, sometimes it's quite nice to see the comments. Other times you're scratching your head and thinking, why would people think that? You know, why? Again, a lot of the time it's assumptions about the source material, and people. I can think back to an instance a couple of years ago, one of the projects that we did, and I'd gone straight back to the source material. I noticed earlier on there was a discrepancy between serial number and code letters. So I went back to logbooks. I went back to every book I could find on the subject, and it ended up being a kind of like you're whittling it down to an area of probability. But this was a subject where there wasn't a photograph of the actual aircraft in this scheme, but there were references to it. And so we went for the best guess we could. And the reason people say, well, why were you doing that particular scheme? was an interesting scheme in terms of the history and the pilot and everything. Anyway, and of course, the moment the artwork was actually put online, somebody came along and said, "No, it's wrong. It's wrong. You got that wrong. You need to whatever." And it was like, well, okay, so what are you basing that on? And they laid out their research, and it was like, yeah, your research is based on a whole load of erroneous assumptions that have been accepted down the years. And what we've done is we've looked at that and gone, no, that's not the case. There are so many holes in that. And anyway, long story short, it was kind of like I pointed this out, and this guy, he just said, he said, I've read what you said, and I've gone away and I've conducted more research, and it was literally like 5 minutes, and he said, I still stand by what I say, and it's like, well, fine, if you believe that, you believe that, but I'm laying out here an absolute, a course of logic as to why we're at this. And I think one of the things that was kind of like telling was it was the serial numbers. One book had listed this serial number as belonging to a certain squadron, but then when you actually dug deeper and actually went through actual first-hand logbooks and things, it was actually allocated to a different squadron. So make of that what you will. But that just gives you an idea of we're not just picking up kind of copies of aircraft of the fighting powers and basing it on that. The one thing one thing I don't like doing is I never like to base any decision making on other people's artwork. I want to go back and see a photograph of the actual aircraft, or kind of go about conducting my own. If we've got no picture of the aircraft, is go out and actually conduct a series of research and reference checks to come up with something that is the most probable. Again, people will say, well, why don't you just base it on aircraft and things that you've got solid reference on? Well, sometimes there are instances of aircraft with an interesting history, but that history was never actually recorded photographically. So it can be it had a famous pilot, it took part in a famous action, but nobody actually stood there and went, do you know what? We should take a photograph of that because somebody in 60, 70 years' time might want to know about that. So yeah, it's a tricky one, but you do try your best to get these things absolutely right. But do I want a credit? Not really, no. No, I just bore you lot with it. So anyway, yes, here's a good question from David Mummery, actually. Let me just have a quick drink here. He says, when you're choosing kit schemes, do you deliberately try to provide an easy scheme to paint as well as a more challenging scheme? That's a very good question. I mean, by and large, most of the time, the schemes are, we kind of have like a short list of schemes anyway. And I'm it's kind of like, well, these are the ones that we would like you to do. I do sometimes try and kind of upset the apple cart and say, well, how about this one? You see, but by and large, I am dutiful and do what has been suggested. But yeah, there are occasions where you're looking at schemes and you're thinking, right, well, this one. Let me give you a good example. Be something like a hawk. Is that you can do something interesting, single color scheme for a hawk. Then you can have like a two-tone camouflage. I'm trying to think, what did we do recently? There was something like that where there was a really kind of like madly involved scheme, which would have been a challenge for for like an inexperienced modeler. But then we kind of put in a much easier scheme. Actually, I think one I'm thinking of at the moment is I think it's one of the Harriers, actually, Harrier GR9. So you had one in the two-tone Mod 95 scheme, but then we just did one which is overall medium sea grey. So yeah, you do. There are balancing factors. I always like to go for the most interesting schemes. I do sometimes like to go for the more unusual schemes, especially ones that have never been done before. There are occasions, and we did touch on this on the on the podcast, was there are occasions where you do have to go for the greatest hit schemes. There's no avoiding it. If good example is going back 10, 12 years ago, there's the little 72nd scale Spitfire Mark 1, brand new kit. You know, we were discussing what schemes were going to be done, and I said, look, you know, I do think you've got to go for really the archetypal Battle of Britain Spitfire, which will be one of the DW coded ones. I think everybody knows DWK. There were several aircraft coded DWK, but for me, DWK is just Battle of Britain Spitfire. You know, it's so kind of iconic. And you have other instances where there are schemes that are so ingrained in the zeitgeist, so to speak, that of course you've got to do them. Now, the problem you got there is you do get modelers who say, you know, they go, oh, boring, seen that one before. Well, you might have, but there's probably a whole raft of modelers and new generation of modelers coming along who've never seen that before. And yes, I do notice this on forums where you've got, you know, you do have people who, because they've been around now for, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40 years in the hobby, they seem to forget that things will be new for other people. Kit companies aren't just gearing their products to, you know, guys on forums, for want of a better phrase, who like things to be kind of like things to be done for their sensibilities. You're always looking to see, you know, what you can do to re-engage people, what you can do to you know, to just bring that story to a new generation of modelers. So you are going to get certain aircraft and certain schemes that, yeah, okay, they have been done to death, but sometimes they are the best scheme to go for, really. You know, and it's there's no avoiding it. You know, and yeah, I mean, I like as I said on the podcast, I like to do some of the unusual ones, and I do. Here's a surprise. I do like to channel my inner Matchbox and Frog and throw things onto decal sheets that are just completely, you know, schemes you weren't expecting. So I think over the last few years, you know, we've done what was it, Portuguese Beaufighters. We've done I'm trying to think what else is coming up. We've got blimey, come on brain, get into gear. We have done one of the Hurricanes. We've done, I think we've done Romanian or Yugoslav Hurricanes. I always get them mixed up. Sorry, chaps. We've done, I know we've done Romanian and Yugoslav 109s. You know, just trying to do these slightly kind of off-kilter schemes. The two-seat Messerschmitt 262, we did the one that was flown by Eric Brown, that was at Farnborough, and it was painted up in British markings. In fact, I tell you what, this is one thing I keep, Dale's going to hate me for this. It's one thing I keep knacking him to do is put in additional schemes on some kits for captured aircraft. So I think, you know, a 0 in captured British markings, you know, some of the Luftwaffe aircraft in British markings or American markings. I just think it sparks and fires people's imaginations. And I remember when I was a kid that I would pick up, I'm just trying to think, Matchbox Fury. I think that came with markings for a Yugoslav one. I'll probably get this wrong, sorry folks. And also the Hawker Fury. It gave you the inline and the radial engine, and that came with Indian markings. That's the one I built a few years ago. And there's all manner of things in the Matchbox range where they gave you really, you know, eclectic decal schemes. So I'm always in favour of those. I like anything that makes people kind of literally, they look at the kit and go, really? You know, I love that. It's part of it's kind of me reliving my youth, but I think if it fires people's imaginations, if it makes them think, I didn't know that, and they go out and pick up a book or they want to research it further, then I think that's good, because that's that's one of the things where you can actually engage people in the hobby, and you can actually get them firing up the old grey matter, and it just it creates that spark which actually keeps people engaged with the engaged with the hobby as well. I've got a comment here. Yoav says, when will the Airfix 72nd Meteor be on sale? I have to ask Airfix, Yoav. I don't know. I just do the stickers. I honestly have no idea. I'm just seeing. Tim Maunder says, "Am I the only viewer?" No, Tim, you're not the only viewer. And here we go. Carlos Ruiz says, some kit brands include decals designed by aftermarket companies as a way to give a plus, same as indicating cartograph as a way to show quality. Yeah, oh, absolutely. I know Daco, Danny Cormans of Daco has done that. The sheets say designed by Daco and whatever. I think, long story short, me personally, I just try and do the best darn job I can and let the work, speak volumes. And if people are still, putting the stencils on their Hawker Hunter, then I like to think they've got value for money there. Mike Williams says, I guess a lot of efforts in customer demographic don't know about or use aftermarket decals. Yeah, that's an interesting comment, Mike. Certainly, as I say, I, as an artist and a modeler, do want to give them that aftermarket experience in terms of a sheet that is utterly complete and as detailed and as accurate as possible. Again, it comes back to that whole thing of that if they're spending, a couple of evenings work putting decals on a Phantom, I know, and there are lots of decals on a Phantom, then value for money. I think there is a kind of element of, we all evolve in this hobby, so we all kind of take on projects as our skills improve. One of the things we do, Airfix do rather with the starter sets is you do strip the decal sheet down to being slightly simpler. It obviously it's cost effective, but it also means, somebody isn't picking up a like a Spitfire 109 and a starter set, and then suddenly they've got all those airframe stencils and all that kind of stuff to deal with, because that's not their that's not their thing. So I think it is definitely horses for courses. A lot of people talking about the 24 scale Spitfire. It will be coming. That's all I can say. It will be coming. Griffia says long drying time will make good for wet blending, etc. This is the Humbrol acrylics. Yeah, it will do. Like I say, at the moment, I'm just in the middle of projects where there's nothing I can really try them out on in terms of an actual project, with schemes and things. But I will do it at some stage. I mean, I've got that that Sky Type S is a good one to to use for. I'm just trying to think. Edward Wildcat. There we go. Now Gordon J, here's a good question. He says, what do I use to thin Mr. Primer surface of 100? Tried some Mr. Color. Okay. What do I use to thin Mr. Primer surface of 1000? Tried some Mr. Color leveling thinner earlier and it turned gloopy. Well, that's interesting, Gordon, because it shouldn't. Because, what have I got? Let's have a look. I'm just seeing where my Mr. Surfacer is. It's all up here somewhere. Well, I haven't got any. Oh, there we go. Mr. Surfacer Grey. There we go. Mr. Surfacer 1000. We'll do it. Unfortunately, I haven't got my camera set up here tonight, but we can do an ad hoc test here. Looking for a paintbrush. That'll do. So I'm just going to decant some. Good Lord. My Mr. Surfacer here has gone a bit I say it hasn't gone thick, it's just gone very, very thick here. It just needs to be stirred up a bit. So, right, I mean, that's how thick my Mr. Surfacer is at the moment. But we'll put some into our little mixing tray here. Goodness me, that is a goodly amount of Mr. Surfacer. So I haven't got the camera. Yeah, I will. Let me just set the camera up a second. Bear with me a second, folks. We will be back in a second. Un momento. There is nothing like being prepared. There's nothing like being prepared, and trust me, this is nothing like being prepared. So that's just, it's like I said, we weren't planning on doing any lives tonight for modeling demos, but we will do one. So bear with me a second. Okay, you're getting to see all the magician's secrets here. There we go. Right. Okay, dokie. Let's just set this up a second. Here we go. Let's just turn this on, and then we can show you what we're going to do. Where's my OBS gone? There we go. Un momento, per favore. Right. Start virtual camera. And we should go to, there we go. Let's just swap cameras over a second, people. Oh, that's good. Ta-da! There we go. Right. We have, for Gordon here, we've put some Mr. Surfacer 1000 there into a little container there. We've got our Mr. Color Leveling Thinner. And hopefully this will work. So it's just a couple of drops in there. There we go, that'll do. Let's get rid of Gordon's comment for a second. Then we have an old paintbrush. And I think you can see, Gordon, that is mixing fine. Gordon, if you can take some photographs of your bottles and post them onto our Facebook page, we will endeavour to try and have a look and see what the problem may be. But as you can see, that is, oops, that's mixing fine. And what we will do as well is, there we go, let's just, we'll put a bit of kitchen towel down, and we will get our trusted Fender airbrush. See, we hadn't planned on doing any demos tonight, so we are doing this on the fly. There we go. So I've just decanted that into the 28 pounds airbrush, and There we go. I'll probably over-thin this a bit. That's an understatement. We have over-thinned that a bit, but lols. But long story short, Gordon, it's not going all lumpy. It is. I say it's probably a bit over-thinned, but you know what? That's massively over-thinned. Let's try thickening it up a bit. As you can see, we're mixing it in this palette here, and it's not going gloopy. It just needs a stir, because this particular bottle I've got here is it's just thickened with age. A bit like me, it's got thicker with age. But we will try and scoop some up into the airbrush here. Right, let's try it now. There we go. It's a bit too thin, but as you can see, it will airbrush. So yeah, I don't know, Gordon, I don't know what the issue is there. I would double check that you're using Mr. Surfacer and you didn't inadvertently pick up one of their bottles of the acrylic thinner, because that acrylic thinner, which is more like an alcohol based one, that's not going to thin Mr. Surfacer. Beyond that, like I say, take some pictures and we'll try and sort out your problem there. But like I say, that's a little bit over thinned. But actually, this is the beauty of Mr. Surfacer, is that you can really bang it on actually. But anyway, there you go. An unscheduled modeling demo tonight. But yeah, send us the pics, Gordon. We will try. We'll try and get to the bottom of that for you. So let's just pop that back on the airbrush station for a second. Catch up with some more comments. Here we go. Luke says, selfish of them not to photograph everything, really. Yeah, actually, it is. It's the long-running complaint I have with researchers, is that they take photographs of aircraft and they're measuring them for kit building, for making the plastic and everything. And there's usually that one marking. You think, oh, brilliant! They've managed to photograph that stencil, and you go through all the photographs and they haven't photographed it. So anyway, Jim says, have you built any Dragon armor kits? I like them very much, despite sometimes ambiguous instructions. Yes, Jim, I built a number. In fact, one of the first 35th scale tanks I built after an absence of many years was their Conqueror tank. This is going back about 7 years ago. Slightly frustrating experience, because the kit was okay, but the instructions are terrible, and that's one area where Dragon really could tighten up on. I'm actually still got up on the shelf here. In fact, I might even take it with me to Waze Fest this weekend, and it's the Dragon armored Jeep. I started building that one 3 years ago. I know, 3 years ago, shocking. And boy, the instructions in that are just, there are illustrations that don't match the kit parts. There are illustrations that don't match the illustrations. It's just they are such an enigma, Dragon. With a little bit more attention to detail, their stuff would be absolutely top dollar, but they just sometimes fall asleep on the job, really. So sorry, Dragon. Yeah, Peter Oxley says DWK was number 610 County of Chester Squadron. Indeed. Steve Moore says, was the Merlin yours? More stencils than an F4. Yeah, it was a bit. And Gordon says, he says, yeah, Gordon actually makes a very good point here. He says, when you look at early Spitfires, there are a lot of variations in the markings. There is a famous photograph that is out there, and it's of 19 Squadron, very early, very kind of phony war period, and it's like a aerial shot looking down on a whole kind of load of them. I don't think there's two aircraft in that formation that have got the same combination of markings. They've all got A pattern or B pattern camouflage. Some of them have got something in between. They've all got round type B red blue roundels that are all in slightly different positions, different sizes, in some instances different proportions. In some instances, some of them have the roundel on both wings, both upper wings. Some of them have the roundel only on the, I think it's the port upper wing. It's going to be one of the upper wings. A couple of them don't even have any roundels on the upper surfaces at all. And again, I seem to remember, this is going back a very long time ago, and somebody took the kit to task and said, no, that's wrong. They should have markings on both upper surfaces. And I mean, you're just like, here's the picture. Let me see if I can find the picture. Keep the questions coming in, folks. We'll run this on till 9 o'clock tonight, and then we'll call it a day. But I'll see if I can find that picture of 19 Squadron Spitfires, because it is such a fascinating photograph. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist in a really kind of like high quality format, but I'm just doing a quick online search here, so bear with me. Blum 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 blum. It's always the case when you're trying to find these pictures. You cannot find the one. That's really annoying. Do you know what? That picture really has been almost every time you do a Google search for 19 Squadron Spitfires, there's all the ones on the ground, but it was like it was a famous photograph of them all flying, and I cannot find that photograph at all, which is really annoying. We'll put it up on the timeline later on. But yeah, essentially it was like, you know, so many different aircraft. Let me just do 19 Squadron Spitfires. Let's try again and see if we can find it. One last go, and then we'll call it a day. Here we go, found it. Yeah, it's got a massive copyright marking on it, but yeah. Let's show you this picture, and come on. I'm trying to get this picture to download now. That's annoying. Right, there is a trick you can do to get pictures when you can't get them, which I'm not going to tell you how you do it, but it's open image in new tab. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Right, we can share this one with you now. So bear with. This is 19 Squadron Spitfires. I think that's the one. There we go. There we go. And as you can see, there we go. You got that one there, WZR. It's got two roundels on the upper wing, but then you got this one here, which hasn't got any. although it does appear to have slightly darker camouflage colors. Then you've got WZN, which appears to have, well, it's got roundels on both upper wings, but the proportions are slightly off. On all of these aircraft, the fuselage roundel is in slightly different positions. Then up here, we've got WZB, which only has a roundel on that wing. And yeah, it's a real smorgasbord of, you know, no two aircraft really look the same. So yeah, make of that what you will. But yeah, as Gordon says, there are some nice variations in them. Okay. Yeah, David Ross says about that, the mystery we've got about the Mr. Surfacer and the thinners. He says, I use this combination all the time. 70% thinners to 30% primer works for me every time. Like I say, Gordon, send us some pictures of what you've got, and we'll try and get to. Okay, who says it wasn't Mr. Surfacer? It was Mr. Primer Surfacer. The thinner and product didn't seem to like each other. Okay. I'm just seeing what Mr. Primer Surfacer is. Ah, right. Okay. That's okay. That's a new one for me. I've got it up here, Mr. Primer Surfacer, but it should be the same as that, really. The packaging looks to be different, but do you know what I'm going to have to do? They've got some on Premium Hobbies. I am going to have to get some and do my own kind of tests on this. So that's curious. Thanks for bringing that to our attention, because that does seem to be. Yeah, we'll get to the bottom of that. We'll work that out one way or the other. And Gordon, here we go. Gordon says, yes, it was Mr. Primer Surfacer or Mr. Hobbit, and just Mr. Pobby's plain old thinner, not the leveling thinner. Okay. Yeah, everybody's saying it should work, so we will get to the bottom of that, Gordon. And Jim Altegart says he's building the Dragon armored Jeep, and he says you are spot on regarding the Jeep instructions. Yeah, they are. They're not good. Here we go. Andrew Hill says, when the vintage releases are chosen to do Airfix repeat the original decal sheet to maintain the whole vintage aspect? No. I think essentially, Andrew, is with the vintage classics. I mean, I don't want to talk, speak on behalf of Airfix or Hornby here, but I think people can work this out for themselves. Is that when you're doing the vintage classics, obviously, if you've got the primary decal scheme does have to match the box art. So you're using iconic box art by Roy Cross and Mac Kenow and people like that, and Brian Knight. So you've got to you can't suddenly start going, we're going to do a brand new scheme, because it's got to match the box art. What I would like to do is perhaps do some slightly different alternate markings in some of the vintage classics, but that's something we have to have negotiations with the chaps up at Hornby. If they say no, fair enough. Me personally, and I'm speaking purely personally here, I'd like to think that there is a bit of latitude for doing something a little bit different with the vintage classics for the B schemes. But like I say, that's decision making, which is made in Margate. If they decide we'd rather just stick to recreating the original schemes, the original B schemes, fair enough. One thing we did do this year was with the 24 scale Harrier, and the aircraft that's in the kit. Dave Fleming's going to correct me here. I think it's XV I think it's XV788, 788 or 778. I'm dyscalculic, so I get my numbers mixed up. And one of the things I said was, well, could we possibly, please, because we're doing the box art one of the #1 squadron aircraft in the hover, and we're doing the US Marine Corps one, VMA, I think it's VMA 513 or something. Can we include some scrap decals, some additional decals, and a scrap view, so that we can actually include the same aircraft on the decal sheet, the same RAF aircraft on the decal sheet, but do it in its earlier guise when it had the D-type roundels? Because for all the times that big Airfix Harrier has been reissued, I mean, bear in mind, as a GR1, it went all the way through to pretty much the early 90s, and never had a change of schemes. It was always the same schemes. And when it was redone as a GR3 around about 2000, there were some new schemes included for GR3s and things, but not GR1s. And then obviously, you know, there have been other reboxings, because this has taken it back to the GR1 boxing again. So I said, well, can we have an actual actual aircraft with D-type markings? Because that's never been included in the big 24 scale Harrier before. And they said, if you can squeeze it in, yeah, you know, it's not no additional colors. It's the same squadron badge, everything. So we were able to squeeze onto that sheet some Type D roundels for the fuselage and the upper wings, and do some scrap views on the layout. So that's an instance where, you know, I think that was a good example of where you could just introduce a little bit of a change. But like I say, other than that, it's not my decision to make. My gravitation is towards, you've got to stick with the A scheme, but if we can do something different for the B schemes, yeah, let's see. You know, let's see if it's possible. If the guys in the office say no, yeah, fair enough. You know, no problem with that whatsoever. So let's have a look. We've got some questions here, and Larry Russo says, "I thought I heard that the other primer is for photo etch." Okay, that's interesting. Anybody can shed light on that? That would be, whoops, Stacey, that would be interesting to know. I've just got some messages coming through. I'm just making sure the messages aren't stop talking about these particular things. You're not allowed to. No, they're fine. In fact, Spencer's just sent me the picture of some American servicemen playing tennis on the upper wing of an F-15. So you look that one up. You'll see it online. And Andrew says, what's the code for the number of the thinner that Gordon used? Yeah, we'll try and resolve that mystery tonight. If not tonight, then we'll try and resolve it before Sunday's show. Talking of Sunday's show, all right, okay, there probably won't be a Sunday show this Sunday, because in theory I will be on my way back from Buckinghamshire. So depending on what time we get back, it's probably going to be too late to do a show for Sunday. So I do apologise for that. However, with a bit of luck, we might be able to do some live streams from the event, depending on how good the mobile signal is and whether I can tether my iPhone to the MacBook. But we might be able to do a couple of live streams-ish. So we'll wait and see. And Paul Cave says, I'd like to know what the actual difference is between Mr. Surfacer and Mr. Primer Surfacer. Here we go. Let's have a look. Mr. Hobby. I've just gone to the Mr. Hobby, MrHobby.com. Here we go. And we've got Mr. There we go. Oh, it says Mr. Primer Surfacer 1000. This is a surfacer primer base filling paint. This material, The material used in Mr. Surfacer 1000, which is gaining overwhelming popularity for plastic models, has been improved for this product. Surface attachment has been enhanced not only for plastic models, but also for metal in etch parts and resin. Spray type and bottle type are available. Color is grey. Yeah, I honestly, I don't know the answer to that. I am still using my bottles of Mr. Surfacer 100. I'll have to ask Drew as well what his experiences are with this, and Spencer, see what they know about it. But we've that's certainly an interesting conundrum we've come up with tonight, and we do like to know what the differences are. There we go. David Ross says, no, Mr. Hobby PE primer is a totally different bottle and you brush it on. And Andrew says, Mr. Metal primer for etch. Primer surfacer is supposed to have better adhesion for multi-surfaces than Mr. Surfacer, but needs a lacquer style thinner. Yeah, this is the thing. This is the thing I'm trying to get my head around, is that Gordon was having problems with Mr. Color Thinner and Mr. Surfacer, albeit Mr. Mr. Surfacer or Mr. Primer Surfacer. But to be honest with you, this is Mr. Leveling Thinner, but I've got ordinary Mr. Color Thinner as well. Pretty much with any of these things, that's the top dog. That will thin downwards. So things like Mr. Color, Mr. Surfacer, Mr. Color, GSI Aqueous, Tamiya lacquers, Tamiya acrylics, AK Real Color. I'm just trying to think any other brands of paint out there. Any of these lacquer-based or acrylic, call them acrylic lacquers and acrylic lacquers, or acrylic, hot acrylic paints. Get the terminology wrong, but all those you can thin with lacquer thinner, Mr. Color Thinner, Tamiya lacquer thinner, all that. You can actually thin some water-based acrylics. As I said, solvent-based acrylics, that's what I should have used. You can use some, somebody's going to say, oh, water is a solvent. You know what I mean? You can thin some water-based acrylics like Vallejo with Mr. Color Thinner as well. But you're on a little bit of a sticky wicket there. But no, you should be able to use this. This should be the top dog that you can thin so many other things with it. So I'm not quite sure why you're having a problem there with Mr. Primer Surfacer, other than I've not used Mr. Primer Surfacer, so I can't comment. So like I say, throw that out there, people, tonight. Anybody else who's used it, if you've used both and you've not had any problems, or you've had problems, do let us know. Just, fill us in on it. We like to solve these conundrums. Yes, and Andrew Hills also says it's also a good paint stripper. Yeah, ask me how I know that. I think that's going back last year, almost this time last year, when I was doing the Kettenkrad figures. And how many times did I just go, don't like that, straight into a little thing of Mr. Color Thinner, strip them off, started again, got halfway through them, didn't like them, strip them off, started again. So yeah, Mr. Color Thinner is a very good paint stripper if you want to use it as a paint stripper. It's also a very good paint stripper if you don't want to use it as a paint stripper and you spill it on your model. So let's just play catch up here and a couple more questions. I've got to say, a lot of people curious about this thing to do with Mr. Color Thinner. So I think we've Mike Williams, he says Mr. Color Thinners will strip enamel paint too. It will also thin enamel paint. And I've thinned, like I say, I've thinned Vallejo model color paint with Mr. Color Thinners. Can have a little bit of an incompatibility issue on some paints where they will literally curdle the stuff. But by and large, it can be done. You have to be very careful, but it can be done. So I got who's sending me a message here. People. Yeah, that's right. Just making sure that somebody isn't. Sometimes we get people messaging us via Messenger, and it's kind of like, do it on the show, easier that way. No, well, here we go. Andrew says, didn't Gordon mention Mr. Hobby Thinner, which suggests an aqueous one? Let's go back to. Let's go back to. No, because he says he used to thin Mr. Primer Surface 1000, tried some Mr. Color Leveling Thinner earlier, and it turned gloopy. So this is what I'm wondering, is if it was Mr. Color Leveling Thinner or Mr. Color Thinner, then, it shouldn't be a problem. If it was Mr. Hobby Thinner, which, as you say, is a kind of alcohol-based one, then you might have a bit of a problem. So, Gordon, as I say, you're on YouTube, but if you can email us some pictures, and that is intmodco@gmail.com, and we'll have a look and see what the issue is. I honestly, I'm like everybody else tonight. We're kind of trying to work out what the problem could be. And Mike Williams says, indeed, Humbrol extra color enamel will spray beautifully when thinned with Mr. Color thinners. I gotta say, is obviously when you're using this stuff, is make sure if you're spraying it in huge amounts, make sure you're absolutely you got masks on and everything, because this is quite aggressive stuff. But I think to describe this as your friend, a bit like the Tamiya lacquer thinners as well. Reaches over. Tamiya lacquer thinners as well. These things are absolutely brilliant because they flash off reasonably quickly. You can really kind of, like, sometimes you can just keep working and working and working and working something, and especially when it comes to gloss finishes, you can push the finish right up to the limit of the paint adhering to the surface. And what I mean by that is, obviously, with enamels and even with water-based acrylics, you get to the point where, when you're spraying them, is if the paint hasn't had the chance to kind of like flash off, you then start pushing paint over the surface. Whereas with lacquer, with solvent-based acrylics and with lacquer paints, because the lacquer thinner helps them flash off so quickly, you can carry on putting the paint on there. What you're not doing is building up a wet finish that you're then pushing around on the surface. It will form a skin which will still be soft to the touch, but you can carry on and carry on and carry on, and it will just keep leveling it off and leveling off and leveling off. And that's why lacquers are especially good for gloss finishes. But yeah, it's down to, the thing is, you do have to adjust your technique with different paints. I found this, and people try spraying Vallejo like they spray Tamiya or Mr. Color, and it's not the same. And likewise, people who are used to spraying, water-based acrylics like Vallejo and some of the Ammo of MiG and stuff like that, and the AK, and they spray solvent-based acrylics and lacquers very gingerly. And frankly, you can be quite brutal with these kind of like solvent paints, for want of a better phrase. You can actually be really quite, not going to say heavy-handed, but you can be more adventurous with them than you can imagine. Mike says Hataka Orange Lane lacquer will work very nicely with Mr. Color thinners and or leathering thinners too. They do. I've got to say though, I was trying out some Hataka paints the other day. It was actually their Sky Type S, and it was already quite well thinned, but goodness me, I know people have had problems with these. This one, it was so translucent. it was going to take an age to build up a color layer, and I gave up in the end. That was when I was spraying that Matchbox Hellcat, which incidentally subsequently went under the Mr. Color, the Mr. Surfacer, in order to strip the paint back off again. So Simon Lewis says, I used some Mr. Color Living Thinning with some Tamiya XF paint. It seemed to split when I shook it. Then I stirred it and it seemed okay, so I sprayed it. It came out 1,000 little dots. I thinned it some more. Pressure was around 15 psi. Should I raise the psi? Simon, did you use any other thinner in that Tamiya paint? I wonder if they've changed the formula for the leveling thinner. It can happen sometimes, is that sometimes acrylic paints can, Tamiya paints, they can suddenly like chalk up, or they can actually kind of separate. The trick there is to just really mix them and carry on mixing them, and just almost grind the pigment back into the solvent with a paintbrush. You've just got to kind of carry on. Came out as 1,000 little dots. I thinned it some more. Pressure was around 15 psi. You could try raising the psi again. Drew says this, and I say this, is don't get locked into this thing of what psi should I use. Use the psi that works. Again, sometimes you have to adjust your technique and your thinning ratios and your pressure settings with different types of paint, different brands of paint, and even sometimes within the same paint range, different colors of paint. You probably find that you can spray gloss paint at a slightly lower psi ratio than you need for some matte paints, but that could be paints from Tamiya. They could be Tamiya XF paints or X paints. They could be Gunzi. They could be the Tamiya lacquers, Mr. Color lacquers. Is that sometimes even within a single paint range, you do have to adjust your thinning and your pressure ratios, because some paints have just got thicker, they've got heavier pigments than others. Again, there's this idea that somehow all paints are equal. They're not. There's little subtle differences that you have to kind of contend with. So try raising the psi, Simon, and see how you got on with it. And he says, I used a paint shaker before thinning it. Bit like this bad boy up here. I don't know what the solution there is, Simon. How old was the bottle? If it was an old bottle, sometimes the solvent and the pigment can separate out. What you could also do is just actually put some. You could actually put some leveling thinner into the actual jar itself, and then give it a good shake and a stir. Or you could get hold of some Mr. Replenisher, which is made by Mr. Hobby, and that's like an Uber solvent, and that will, if you've got a thing of paint, and there's like a tiny little thin dried skin at the bottom of it, and you think, but I just need a little bit more out of that, a little bit more. So Mr. Replenisher in there, and it will. You can still use that paint in to a certain extent. David says, David says, drying before it hits the surface, maybe. Have a look at that, Simon. Like I say, don't be afraid of changing your thinning ratios and your pressure settings. Different colors sometimes just require a different approach. It's like I say, I see people asking what thinning ratios do you use? What pressure ratios do you use? They change. They change from paint to paint. They can change depending on what time of the day you're spraying as well. At the moment, because it's been really quite hot in the last few days, I would have been upping the thinner ratio for any spraying, because the paint would be drying so quickly that I'd actually let the thinner do a lot of the heavy lifting there. So It all depends. Mike Williams says, I never seem to use the same ratios of thinners and pressure twice. There we go. I constantly adjust every time I spray, regardless of paint range, though Mr. Colour leveling thinners is my constant for most paints. Same here, Mike. I've got that, and I've used the Tamiya lacquer thinner. They are pretty much an equal in terms of what they can do with paints. But there is never... I'm always adjusting the thinning ratios and the pressure ratios as well. I mean, a good example is that I can use a slightly higher pressure ratio and slightly less thinned paint for getting base colors down, get a good even base color down. When it comes to fine lining camouflage and freehanding, whatever, then I up the thinning ratio. And that could be something like 70% thinner, 30% paint. Then I will take the pressure down so that I've got a little bit more control over everything. Got to say, I haven't done any freehanding for a very long time. This year, I don't think I've done any. But oh, perhaps I did. Perhaps my brain's playing tricks with me. But yeah, you don't use the same. There isn't a one size fits all fix for this. It is all. This is the thing we always say: is it is down to experimentation, and I think most modelers will eventually find their feet, and they'll find the things that work for them. Then they will pass that advice and that experience on to the next generation of modelers. There is no instant easy fix with any of these things. They all have to be tailored. They all have to be tailored not only to the paint and the thinner you're using, but even the airbrush you're using and the compressor that you've got. If you've got like a compressor and it doesn't have a pressure setting, then you're going to have to kind of really mess around with your thinning ratios and whatever. It all depends. If you've got an airbrush which has got a larger needle and a larger nozzle, that's going to affect your thinning and your pressure ratios. There are so many variables. I know sometimes it's not a helpful answer when somebody says, what are your pressure settings and whatever. It's kind of like, well, they tend to be around this, but what airbrush do you have? What size needle nozzle and what needle nozzle got a bit goon show there, and what what paint are you using, what thinning ratios are you using. It's all one big experiment, folks. But like I say, you find your feet and then you start finding what works for you, and that's when you start getting consistency. Simon says it was a hot day when I was wondering if that was a factor. If it was in the last week, Simon, probably was a factor. Actually, probably was. Try leaving it into the evening when it's a bit cooler. Try upping the thinning ratio. Take some photographs. Take some photographs of what you've done, what it's like. Pop them up on our timeline, and we'll try and advise you from that. David Ross says that's what busters are for. To adjust absolutely everything before you commit to painting the model, in my opinion. Yep. That's why we have paint mules. That's why we have things like this that we try things out on, and then when we make mistakes, like I did there, you can see where I got my thinning ratio slightly wrong and I flooded the surface with paint. That's what we do. We test these things out, and then when we're happy with it, then we go on to the finished model. I think it's probably best to say that when you're trying to adjust these things, is don't go straight onto the model. Just don't put the paint in there, a little bit of paint, a little bit thinner, blah, 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 right, let's go on the model. That's it. It happens. I've done it. Truth be told, I still do it, but we all do it. Don't worry. John Conley says, Mr. Hobby have been changing some of the colours lately, so may have altered their primers and thinners as well. I would not be surprised. And I know they've also been messing around with the formula for their Mr. Mark Setter and Mr. Mark Softer. So I think what I'm going to have to do, and Luke at the Froome Model Centre and Mr. Andrew Hills at Antics are going to be delighted to hear me saying this, I'm going to have to get some of the most up-to-date thinners that Mr. Hobby do, and also get some of these new primers as well. So put them to the test and see what the story is there. It could be they've changed them. It could be they've changed them because I'm still using stuff here which is, 10 years old. That I'm behind the times, which wouldn't be the first time, quite frankly. But yeah. We will endeavour via the Facebook page to try and solve these mysteries. Anyway, look, folks, I'm sorry to say, / I'm pleased to say, for your sakes, if anything, that we're going to have to call time on this tonight. And as I say, we most probably won't be doing a live show on Sunday because we will be coming back from Waze Fest, but we will endeavour to try and do some pop-up lives at the show using whatever technology is available. I wonder if there is if there is Wi-Fi at the venue. That would be good. Might ask them. So we'll try and do some lives, even if it's a very bad tethering to the iPhone. We'll try and do something. We will, of course, bring you back photographs and reports, and there'll be loads of vehicles there. So also some nice references as well. Hopefully, a bucket load of modelling inspiration. And with a bit of luck, I might even advance some projects here. Like I said, I'm going to take a Bren carrier with me. I'm looking forward to doing the Italy Crusader because that's a kit from my youth. No, the figures were something I built as a kid. I think I did build the Italy Crusader a few years ago and made a right hash of it. So I'd like to go back and visit that one again. I'll be interested in seeing the figures in that Italy kind of it's kind of like a British tank crew set that they do, which includes a Monty figure and a commander and a few other bits and pieces. Because I've seen in one of the Verlinden Way books, he actually used that set in a diorama. And Francois made those figures look really good. I know sometimes the older figures aren't the best sculpts, but whatever he did, he was able to make them look more than presentable. So I think sometimes, it's often down to the modeler as it is, the actual quality of the figures themselves. So I'm looking forward to doing something where I can build up a little vignette based around that Italy Crusader with the figures and everything, and kind of build something that I would have wanted to have built as a kid, but not only finally get around to building it, but actually hopefully building it with a modicum of presentable skills, despite the fact that I'm still a kid, just a big old one now. Here we go. Paul K says, hopefully talk at some point over the weekend, Jem, maybe even over some cake. Paul, if you're coming along, do pop your head into. I'll be on the hobby company stand. You'll see my big fat head in there. It's a good job it's an outside venue because we wouldn't get my head inside a building. But yeah, do pop along and say hello and introduce yourself. Anybody who's coming along to the show at the weekend, yeah, do pop along and say hello, and might even have some giveaway interesting modelling company badges for you. And Andy Brennan. Well, that's rather mystic, Andy. He says, "Stop press. Kinetic releasing a 1/72 in 2023. Huge. 1/72 scale. What, Andy? Cryptic, not mystic. Let's just go on to Facebook a minute, folks, and see what Andy's talking about. Hey, how exciting! Hello, here we go. Hello, dear friends. Okay," he said, trying not to hold on to your horses, folks. It's the first time we've ever actually done a live where a kit has actually been announced live when we have been doing a show. And what it is Kinetic have announced they are doing a 1 72nd scale, ready. C17 Globemaster 3. Yeah, okay. I think we'll go full screen to let you all have a think about that for a moment. Yeah, that's going to be massive. Yeah. Okay. What you doing? What you doing on Wednesday night? I watched that interesting modelling company nonsense, but then he was completely floored by the fact that Kinetic announced a 72nd scale C17 live when he was doing the show. Well, yeah, that's going to be a monster. Well done, Kinetic. You know what's going to happen now, don't you, folks? Is if Kinetic are doing a C17, somebody somewhere is going to be doing a C5 Galaxy. Who knows? Who knows? But on that note, oh, here we go. Here's a good comment. MF Doomer TV says just got into the hobby at 22. Excellent, well done. You're never too old to start. You're never too young to start. And absolutely fell in love with it. Thanks for all the great content, sir. Very kind of you. I'm currently making a World War I Mark IV captured by Germans in 135th. Cheers. Brilliant. In that case, then, MF Doomer, I would suggest head over to YouTube and look up Night Shift Modeler, because Martin Kovac has recently been building a World War I Mark IV tank, and he's done well. It's Martin Kovac, of course, he's done a brilliant job on it. But yeah, he's an absolutely brilliant modeler. But yeah, thanks for that. That's very kind of you to say that. We just try to be kind of like, we try and just be inspirational, perspirational, certainly in this weather. I think we, myself, Drew, Spencer, and everybody else involved with the Interesting Modelling Company, we've always believed that the best way to keep this hobby going is just encourage people to build things. And it doesn't matter what your level is, just build something. And even if you build it and you're not happy with it, don't worry, build something else. All of us, through the process of repetition and refinement and making mistakes and going back and trying again and trying again, trying again, that is how we all make those incremental and sometimes seismic advances in our technique. So, you know, there's never really a model that's a failure, because everything is still a learning experience. So anyway, yeah, Jan says 73 centimeters long. And yeah, Hobby Time says, can you imagine a 72nd scale Seaside Galaxy the size of that? You know what? Somebody's going to do it now. Somebody is going to do it. And there we are. MF Doomer says, yeah, Night Shift is actually who inspired me to get into the hobby. He's absolutely top bloke, Martin. He really is. Yeah, I'm just reading some of the comments here. Dougal Woogle says, any update getting Martin on show? We are trying. He's very, very busy with his channel, obviously, but we'll carry on chipping away. And all things to everyone. I'm glad we're something. And Simon Lewis says, I think modelers are like hard rock fans, just like to share their passion. Exactly. So on that note, everybody, I'm afraid we are going to have to end this for tonight. As I say, we probably won't be back on Sunday, but we will be doing some pop-up live shows, hopefully in the meantime. And like I say, hopefully we've got a bit of a format here now that when Spence and Drew aren't available, and indeed Mike, because Mike was indisposed this evening, then we'll come up with JMQs, which is a way of not dodging out of doing another live show. So we'll think of something. And yeah, just to say, that's Italy's publicity photograph of their Crusader with the figures. I actually quite like the idea of doing it but leaving the figures in grey. But I think I do need to paint some figures. Oh, good, painting 6 figures, brilliant. Anyway, on that note, as always, we'd just like to say, people saying welcome aboard to MF Doomer. Yeah, absolutely, welcome aboard, and come back for our live shows. We always like to see the comments from everybody. So, a big thank you to everybody tonight. We will be, like I say, we'll try and be back on Sunday. In the meantime, please do take care out there. It is not only are we still trying to dodge a pandemic at the moment, but some of the temperatures out there have been absolutely mad this week. I started Monday lunchtime watching the 1961 Val Guest film, The Day the Earth Caught Fire. Yeah, it's film club time now. Which, if you've never seen it, it stars Edward Judd, Leah McKern, and Janet Monroe, and essentially it's a film that it's framed within the offices of the Daily Express in London, where there's a bit of a heat wave going on, but they then start noticing that there are other extreme weather events happening around the globe, and then there are things like extreme temperatures that suddenly lead to kind of like, wildfires in England, massive wildfires in England. Then there are kind of like storms and cyclones. And I watched this film in 1987, where it was about the day after we had the hurricane in London. And it's kind of about that. And then it kind of like, it gets to the stage where they realize that something dreadful has gone wrong somewhere. And it's quite funny because at one stage you see all these newspaper headlines, and it's literally like, cool, what a scorcher, London basks in 99 degrees Fahrenheit weather, and it's new record high. I tell you what, the record high has been broken since 1960. Anyway, no, we'll get on with it. Anyway, but the thing is at one stage they're mocking up the newspaper headline for the next day's issue, and it says on there, "World's climate changing," and that was a film in 1961. But there was a point to that long story. The long preamble to that is, folks, it is ridiculously hot out there still. So don't take any chances. If you've got to go out, if you're driving anywhere, take plenty of time. Make sure you've got plenty of water. Make sure you are hydrating properly. And if you do have to go outside, get in the shade, get out of the sun as quickly as possible, or slap some sun cream on. You don't mess around with this weather. And also try and watch The Day the Earth Caught Fire, because that's sobering stuff. Anyway, on that note, we'll see you at some stage over the weekend, either in moving picture form or via the magic of still images. Until then, stay safe, seriously, stay out of trouble, and we'll see you very soon. Bye for now.